And welcome to the program. I'm Susan Ilian. The investigative committee of Russia have detained a suspect in connection with the explosion that killed a military blogger at a cafe in St. Petersburg. Earlier, Russia's Interior Ministry has added a woman to a wanted list as a suspect in connection with the cafe blast. The ministry said in a release, which included her mugshot, that the woman, identified as 26-year-old Daria Trepova, is wanted in the murder of Russian military blogger Vladimir Tatarsky. Ms. Trepova was detained hours after her mother and sister were brought in for questioning. She had been reportedly detained for a number of days after an anti-war protest in February last year. Trepova's husband, Dmitry Rylov, told the independent Russian publication The Insider that he is convinced his wife was really just set up and used. Meanwhile, the Kremlin said that the assassination of prominent military blogger was a terrorist act and cited Russia's anti-terrorism committee in saying that there was evidence linking Ukraine to the bombing. In a call with reporters, Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov referred to a statement by the committee, adding, "This is a terrorist attack. The active phase of the investigation is now underway." Peskov blamed what he described as the Kiev regime for its likely involvement in planning the attack. And Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has declined to make any comment about the explosion. Zelensky said while on tour of the northern Chernihiv region, quote, "About St. Petersburg, I'm not thinking about what is going on in St. Petersburg or in Moscow. They have to think, Russia have to think about their cities. I'm thinking about our country and our cities." Ukraine has said little about the explosion beyond blaming infighting in Russia. In the meantime, head of Russia's Wagner mercenary group, Yevgeny Prigozhin, said he would not blame the Kiev regime for the explosion in St. Petersburg. Prigozhin said that he thought of a group of radicals that were behind the explosion. Russian news agency TASS quoted an unnamed source as saying the bomb was hidden in a miniature statue that was handed to the blogger as he addressed a group of people in the cafe. It said the explosion happened minutes later. Prigozhin said that the cafe previously belonged to him, but he has since given it to patriotic activists who have been holding meetings there. And the number of those injured in the explosion has risen to 32. Meanwhile, the head of Russia's Wagner mercenary group said that his forces have raised the Russian flag over the administration building of the town of Bakhmut in Ukraine. Prigozhin said in a video message posted by his press service on the Telegram messaging app that from a legal point of view, Bakhmut has been taken. The Wagner boss said the flag had the words, "In good memory of Vladimir Tatarsky," written on it following the assassination of the Russian blogger. Prigozhin added that the Ukrainian military is concentrated in the western parts of the Bakhmut. The United Nations human rights chief Volker Turk deplored how grave human rights violations were shockingly routine in Russia's invasion of Ukraine and said the number of civilian casualties was far higher than official figures. Rights Council in Geneva, Turk said Ukraine was a nation struggling to survive in the face of Russia's invasion. Fighting is still raging in eastern and southern Ukraine, where Russian forces hold swaths of territory captured after they invaded in February of last year.
But today, a nation is struggling to survive. After 13 months of the Russian Federation's war against Ukraine, severe violations of human rights and international humanitarian law have become shockingly routine. People across the country face massive suffering and loss, deprivation, displacement and destruction. Using the rigorous methodology of my office, our staff have verified more than 8,400 civilian deaths and over 14,000 civilians wounded since 20 February of last year. These figures are just the tip of the iceberg. Most of the casualties resulted from the Russian forces' use of wide impact explosive weaponry in residential neighborhoods.
I truly fear that we have only scratched the surface when it comes to Russia's atrocities in Ukraine. While the Commission of Inquiry and the High Commissioner enjoy the strong cooperation of Ukraine in their investigations, Russia refuses to provide access to areas that it occupies. Ukrainian and international investigators and human rights monitors must continue to assess the damage, talk to victims, and uncover the graves. This is the only way to ensure accountability for those responsible and justice for all of the victims and their families. To move forward, it is now critical that the HRC renew the mandate of the Commission of Inquiry and make certain that it has the needed resources to carry out its critical work.
Ukraine held an international conference dedicated to atrocities committed in Bucha as the town near Kiev marked the anniversary of its recapture after 33 days of occupation. Ukrainian Prosecutor General Andriy Kostin, who opened the discussion, underlined the importance of investigation and justice. Kostin said his office had identified almost 100 Russian soldiers suspected of war crimes in Bucha, and indictments against 35 of them had been sent to court.
Gathered information has allowed us to trace the patterns of international crimes committed by Russia and its proxies. We see it as a deliberate strategy to destroy Ukraine as a state and Ukrainians as a nation, along with massive display of war crimes. Many of these atrocities have been committed here in Bucha, and thus it bears the hallmark of genocide. I truly hope all this evidence will result in unprecedented results, justice being served, and perpetrators being held accountable in Ukrainian as well as before international courts and tribunals.
We have to do this for the whole global community. We have to make it a standard of reaction to aggression anywhere, to atrocity crimes, war crimes, crimes against humanity, crimes against human dignity, everywhere. So that potential perpetrators not even dare think twice, but they don't think at all about committing crimes against civilian populations and violating international law, conventions, and the rule of law. Peace without justice is not peace.
Ukrainian military showed mobile air defense units capable of intercepting Shahid-type drones and cruise missiles. Volunteer-brought trucks were equipped with machine guns able to shoot down targets that fly lower than 2 kilometers. For other targets, the mobile units are equipped with man-portable air defense systems. Russia's been launching drone strikes on Ukraine for months, hitting infrastructure and civilian objects. Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu promised to boost munition supplies to Russian forces in Ukraine during a visit to the headquarters of Moscow's troops fighting in the country. In video published by the Defense Ministry, Shoigu was shown presiding over a meeting with senior military officers, including General Valery Gerasimov, Russia's most senior soldier. Shoigu has in recent months come under bitter criticism from hardline advocates of Russia's campaign in Ukraine, including Yevgeny Prigozhin, head of the Wagner mercenary group, who have accused him of failing to supply sufficient ammunition to troops on the front line.
Dear colleagues, the issue of supplying troops with lethal weapons is currently under constant control by the government and by the Ministry of Defense. The volume of supplies of the most needed ammunition has been determined. Necessary measures are being taken to increase them. This week, I checked the fulfillment of the state defense order by the defense industry for the production of ammunition. Due to the expansion of production capacities and the increase in labor productivity, The production to support the troops has increased manifold. It includes both conventional and high-precision weapons.
Polish presidential advisor Marcin Przydacz says Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is expected to visit Poland on April the 5th. The Polish president's foreign affairs advisor made the announcement during an interview with Polish local media today. Poland has been one of the most vocal European nations against Russia, even before the invasion of Ukraine. Warsaw has also taken a lead among NATO allies in supplying Kiev with heavy weapons. Meanwhile, Poland says it has already delivered several MiG-29 fighter aircrafts to Ukraine. Poland announced it would send the aircrafts, which were about to be decommissioned by the country's Air Force on March 16th. Ukraine has long published for deliveries of fighter jets from its allies. So far, only Poland and Slovakia, which has promised to deliver 13 MiG-29 fighter jets, have answered that call. NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg says Finland will join NATO on Tuesday, April the 4th, a step that will make Finland safer and the alliance stronger. The announcement comes 4 days after Turkey's parliament approved a bill to allow Finland to join NATO, clearing the way for the country to become part of the Western Defense Alliance as war rages in Ukraine. The Turkish parliament was the last among the 30 members of the alliance to ratify Finland's membership after Hungary's legislator approved a similar bill earlier this week. Finland and Sweden asked to join NATO last year in response to Russia's invasion of Ukraine, but the process has been held up by Turkey and Hungary.
This is a historic week. Tomorrow we will welcome Finland as the 31st member of NATO, making Finland safer and our alliance stronger. We will raise the Finnish flag for the first time here at the NATO headquarters, provided bilateral security assurances, and now with Finland as a full member, that will further increase Sweden's security and also further integrate Sweden into NATO, because Finland and Sweden are so closely integrated already. So I'm saying all of this because we should not leave the impression in the way that Sweden is left alone. No, Sweden is very much inside NATO, integrating into military and civilian structures. Allies are ready to act, and it's inconceivable that there were going to be any threats or military attacks against Sweden without NATO reacting, and even more so with Finland as a full member.
Joining me now is global affairs analyst Edward Okpa. He joins me virtually from Dallas, Texas. Nice to have you here, Edward. I just want to know, Mr. Edward, an explosion has occurred in St. Petersburg, as we know, in what appears to be the second assassination on Russian soil. Now, why was this Russian military blogger targeted?
Well, thank you for having me on the show. Anytime you have a conflict, like the one you have between Russia and Ukraine, you're going to have people on both sides trying to, inflict as much damage on each side. They're going to use, like the attack that just happened, they're going to use saboteurs, sabotaging each other. So it's not unusual. And maybe this is to send a signal to Russia that, while you're fighting us across the border, we're going to start fighting you inside the border. And so it's going to escalate and heighten, the conflict.
And Russia believes this assassination is a terrorist act and has said it has evidence Ukraine is linked to the bombing. Do you see any iota of truth in this claim of it being a terrorist attack?
I mean, in today's world, it doesn't take a whole lot to label anything terrorist. I mean, in U.S., we look at the drug cartels as terrorists. Congress is trying to, have a definition that will, call such activity terrorism, and then so. Russia saying that is just to justify again, the severity of what has happened, and then so that they can take action to say, oh, it's a terrorist stuff. So I don't think UN has any definition about terrorism that applies or that every nation has accepted to be the universal definition. So anybody can come up with that and use it to their own advantage. So what you see is a reactionary thing from Russia, because now they're going to have to do something, equally dangerous or more severe on the other side.
All right. And you perhaps, Mr. Edwards, do you perhaps see this as a retaliatory attack? What's just happened?
Of course, it is. If it's Ukraine that engineered it, yes, there is a retaliation. If it's some people inside Russia that are angry at their own government for doing it, is to send a signal to their leadership that this war is unnecessary or this war is causing, severe damage to civilians. So they're going to do anything, against the leadership. And if it's something as high profile as the military man, they will do it. It's just a human nature reacting to unusual situation because of war and conflict.
Mr. Edwards, much of the dissent we saw in Russia in the early weeks of the invasion has been silenced by the Kremlin. Now, where does the anti-war movement stand today?
I'm sorry, again, say that your audio says.
I want to know where the anti-war movement stands today.
The anti-war against Russia, because, Russia seems to be the aggressor, or Russia is the aggressor, because they're the one that invaded Russia. So there's an anti-war against Russia, but then again, Russia has, managed to get their own, supporters, encouraging them or supporting them for what they are doing. So the entire thing is universal. U.S. is supporting Ukraine by sending them arms. But at the same time, we don't have American soldiers in the country. Other Western Europeans are doing it. So the anti-war thing is going on, is global. But let's not forget, Ukraine and Russia thing is captivating the world. But don't forget that between Rwanda and Congo are people dying. So the Ukraine war is because it's all about white people and Europeans. And I have an issue. I have a strong issue. When it's European conflict, they try to take it and describe it as world war. But if it's between African nations, nobody cares. It's an internal conflict. So the world has to, wake up to this definition. And then we're all members of the United Nations. Maybe we should change the definition so that every member of the United Nations should have a security vote. Because right now, it's only 5 out of the number of almost 200 nations that are there. Remember, UN was formed in 1948 partially in a reaction to the World War I and II. But now we're in the 21st century. African nations that constitute the largest segment of countries per continent should stand up and say, we want a member in the Security Council, or they should pull out. You shouldn't subscribe to a club when the charter of the club was written and you were not a member, but you also abiding by the rules. African nations should have the balls to stand up and say, we want out or include us. So I don't know whether this is a digression or addition to, but this having to draw the entire world into conflict with European countries is unfair to the rest of the world. Again, Rwanda and Congo people have died, but it's not in the news. So what is the if we're going to do anti-war, we should do it globally. Anywhere there's a war that is unjust, we should do that.
Yep, I'm with you, Mr. Okpa. Thank you very much. We really appreciate having you.
Well, thank you for having me on your show.